thank you so much for being willing to take the time to do this interview. And really want to just start talking to you about mastermind groups. It's something we do here at L3 Leadership and that we're extremely passionate about. And, as I was reading over your profile and just doing research on you, I learned that you were in a mastermind group with Dave Ramsey for, I think, well over a decade. And so I just want to start there. That must have been quite an opportunity. I'm sure Dave wasn't the only sharp person in the room. Obviously, you were there. What did you learn in that time in being in Dave's mastermind group? And then specifically, what did you learn from Dave? I'd be curious.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that, Doug. Dave wasn't the only person in the room. He was a sharp guy. There were 10 other guys in there that were equally sharp. And I want to go back just a little bit. Let's digress just a little bit to a few decades ago. I didn't even know what a mastermind group was. I was at the Curb Center watching a Mercy Me concert. And Dave walked up to me and he said, "Hey, Big A," he said, "I want you to think about joining my mastermind group." Dave and I had a long time relationship prior to that. I was his second sponsor, sponsored his show for 21 consecutive years. So we had quite a history right out of the gate. We both live here in Nashville. And so I was with him from day one. When he launched his show, he came to me and said, "Hey, I want you to promote our show." And I did. And that turned into a friendship, which later turned into being a member of his mastermind group. But to be honest, Doug, I didn't want to join. I went to Robin, my wife, and I said, "I don't want to go in there. I don't want to do this." And she said, "Why?" I said, "Well, you know how Dave is. He's all up in your business. He's in your face. He's going to be telling me to do certain things. And I just don't know if I want to do that." And she said, "You ought to go check it out." So I went to the room and I said, "Dave," I said, "I don't even know what this is about." And he said, "I'm going to invite a lot of other really cool people you'll enjoy getting to know. And I think it'll be something good for you." So I went right out of the gate, Doug. I sat down at the table and they said, "Hey, we're going to study these books together and we're going to learn." I said, "Dave, I don't like to read." He goes, "I don't care if you like to read or not." He goes, "Here's the book, get to reading. You don't just get smarter through osmosis. Like, dude, we got to be filling our minds up with positive things you're going to learn." And I'm like, "Okay, here we go. It's already started." So he introduced me to the other guys in the room, and they've turned out to be some of my best friends over the course of my life. And it was a place where I really learned that vulnerability and transparency, where those two things intersect, that's where strength really begins. And it allowed me a safe environment to where I could let the veil down the facade that I was living and be totally vulnerable and transparent in a very closed environment, that they could allow me the vantage point from trusted advisors that could really help take my life to the next level. And I adopted this strategy decades ago, and I've never looked back. And quite honestly, it's been probably the catalyst for the success that I've had over the past few decades.
Wow. Well, I certainly want to take time and dive deeper into mastermind groups, which we will in a second. But just while we're on the subject of Dave, I just think it would be fun, in your years of friendship with Dave, what do you think is the greatest lesson, or maybe two lessons that you've learned from Dave's life and business?
Yeah, I would have to say that his tenacity, his grit, his determination, his mindset of can do. He's very focused. He's probably the most focused individual that I've ever known. And like I said, for 30 years now, we've been close friends. And I've never been in a room with another person that had that level of focus. He didn't allow the shiny objects to deter him from his mission. And if it wasn't on the agenda and it wasn't something that was in the vision, it didn't distract him. And so he really conveyed that in a strong way, which I adopted 30 years ago, to say, if this is where I'm going to go, that's where I'm going to focus and I'm going to accomplish that thing. And I'm not going to be deterred by the shiny object syndrome. So there's many, many other things that he's taught me over the years, but I would say his level of focus and commitment and tenacity is second to none.
That's wonderful. Let's talk mastermind groups. So let's go back to how you said you didn't even know what a mastermind group was. There's people who are listening to this; they may not know what a mastermind is. How do you define a mastermind group, and why are they important?
I think we overcomplicate mastermind groups. They're really your trusted advisors that are
Yeah.
non-biased, that you subject yourself to their scrutiny and you're willing to listen to what they have to say. It's kind of like peer advisory group or your own board of directors. It's people that really know you intimately. And the reason that you need to be involved in a group like that is we only have one filter. There's only one way that we can see things, regardless of how you would like to see them. You were raised in a certain environment, you had certain influences in your life. And perspective is the number one value for being in these groups, alongside of somebody that's willing to encourage your superpowers, somebody that can point out the kryptonite in your life and then show you your blind spots, because the blind spots is the things that normally get us. But also, we can borrow their courage when we don't have any. It's
Mm.
somebody that can walk alongside us and understand what our vision is and help hold us accountable along the journey to accomplish your goals and dreams. There's countless things that are valuable in mastermind groups, but I use the analogy, Doug, if you were to ask me a question today, let's just hypothetically say it was about your finances. Let's just say that you wanted to buy a condo, a second home in Destin, Florida. And you said, Big A, do you think I could afford to do that? Well, the truth is, I don't know. You appear to be successful. You've got a lot of cool things going on. But the truth is I don't know your wife. I don't know your children. I don't know your aspirations. I don't know what your propensity is. I don't know what your skills are. I don't know what the historical data for your life is. I don't know your financial wherewithal. And so I could say, Doug, it would be nice, uh, but I really don't know. You see, you're not going to share all that information with the general populace, but you would in a close environment with 10 or 12 people, and then they could help you intellectually make that decision. But if I don't know that data, then I could give you a generic answer, but it wouldn't be applicable to you personally. And so for me, I want accurate information. I want an assessment to be made that people can give me solid advice. And unless they know that level of detail of my life, they can't really help me.
I'm curious, in your experience in the mastermind groups you've been a part of, do you have a moment? I know there's probably a ton of these, but a moment that you would just say, this happened in my mastermind group one time. I received this feedback, or XYZ happened and it changed everything for me. Whether it was a piece of advice, I'd just be curious if you have a story related to that.
Yeah, I'm a creator developer. I've owned 14 businesses over the course of 43
Wow.
years, and I'm not a maintainer manager. And I'll go take a shower and get out with 3 new ideas every day, right? I've got these new ideas. And where it really helped me in the mastermind group is like I would go in, for an example, I would go in the Eagles. That's what we were called. I'd go in the Eagles group and I would say, man, I want to do X. And Dave Ramsey or Ken Abraham or Dan Miller, one of those guys would go, Dave primarily would go, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard, man. You can't do that. Dan Miller would go, wait a minute, Dave, hold on a second. If he would do this and this and this, and maybe eliminate this or tweak this or redo this, I think maybe this would work. Well, see, you don't know what you don't know. And other people have insight, they have perspective that I haven't had. And they were able to go, hey, historically, this is proven to be true, and here's why. Or this won't work because of X. And so I could pick out countless examples that that's been the case. And I've propelled myself to success in certain arenas that I didn't have previous info on or insight about because they had been there. That's the reason that you want these groups even more diverse,
Hmm.
right? If everybody looked just like Doug Smith, we only need one Doug Smith, but you want the diversity, the other business experiences. And that way, everyone is contributing to the value of the mastermind. And so a lot of people say, I want people to look just like me, act like me. It's like, well, no, you don't need that. You need more
Right.
diversity in these groups than less. And so, yeah, having done this now for 22 years, I've been in a mastermind group every week for 22 years. Uh, every bit of my life. It's not just professionally, though, it's personally as well. Back in 2001, unfortunately, I was in a horrible automobile accident. I ran over and killed a pedestrian
Hmm.
on my way to the office. And if it hadn't have been for the support of these guys
Sure.
and what they did for me and undergirded me and gave me strength and courage when I didn't have any, I probably would be crawled up in a fetal position under my desk today.
Hmm.
And they were able to walk me through that horrific automobile accident. There was another time in my life where I made some bad choices, and they were able to walk alongside me from a relationship standpoint, call me out and say, this is inappropriate. You shouldn't do this, and able to help me and mend some relationships back together. There were some times in my life where I was bitter. There was unforgiveness, and they were able to challenge me on that and say, you continue down this path, you're going to use that as a filter in your life, and everything is going to be tainted as a result of you using this unforgiveness in your life. And I was able to eradicate that out of my life, and I was able to make better decisions. And there was times in my life I wanted to make a financial investment, and they heightened my awareness to things in my life that I couldn't, and here's why. And then there were spiritual needs in my life that they were able to shed light on, that I made better decisions as a result of it. And you see, we, as I said earlier, don't know what we don't know. And when you subject yourself to that level of scrutiny, to people that don't have anything to gain or lose as a result of their advice and input, the general consensus of that multitude is really going to serve you well. But the benefit is when you're in it long term, and then they can see how you live your life, what's important, these aspirational goals that you have, and they can just shore up underneath you and pick you up and walk you down that journey to accomplish those goals. See, they always say if you want to go fast, go alone, but if you want to go far, go with a community. And that's what the mastermind group is.
Yeah, so I want to talk about a few things for people who may be interested in them. One is Cadence. You said you've been in a mastermind group every single week. As you've led masterminds and been a part of them, have you found what's your ideal cadence for someone joining a mastermind group? If you had to
Yeah,
pick
I've been in a group every week for 22 years, and will
the
continue
same
to.
group.
Well, we started, which gets in kind of the history. So we met for a dozen years, in Dave's office, and we don't do that any longer because you want to take what you learn, right, and multiply that, and now not be a mentee but a mentor. And then you go out, and these guys have now started other groups and very successful in their own right in doing that and sharing. And it's having kind of an abundance mindset. It's sharing what you've learned, with others. And I'm not the sage wisdom, but I do have 43 years of entrepreneurship. I've been married 42 years. I've got 5 grandchildren. I've got a little bit of value that I feel like I can add. And why would I want to just sit in a group and not go do that and teach other people? And so my mission is helping ordinary men become extraordinary in all that they do. And so I want to continue to share and to educate and to teach. The irony of that is the more we do that, the more people we attract, the bigger we get. Iron Sharpens Iron is our mastermind group. Now we have 17 groups. We're in 7 different countries around the world. We have aspirations and goals of having 30 groups in the next 18 months. And so we just continue to teach and encourage others to show them the value of surrounding themselves with competent, capable people. And when you do that and you're a giver, the natural reciprocity is people want to give back to you. So instead of having takers, we've built a community of givers.
And what advice would you give to someone who's saying, "Wow, this sounds great. I would love to be a part of a mastermind group." There's thousands of mastermind groups out there. How do you really find one? Should you start your own? What would your advice be to someone looking for one?
Well, you could do either or. Some people are not really qualified or capable in starting right out of the gate leading a group, especially if they've not familiarized themselves with them. So I would investigate really getting, first of all, together with a group of people, maybe in your community, maybe in your civic groups that are there locally, or your church, or just business people. You could assemble a group. Historically, what I've found, though, that those groups don't really last long term. They will for a short period of time, but if there's no skin in the game, if you're not paying, people attend what they pay for. And any opportunity to come up to make a sale or to go play golf or hang out with their buddies, they're going to do that instead of making a commitment to meet with the group. So there are some groups that do okay meeting without paying, but we just really pay attention to what we pay for. So I would suggest highly getting involved in a group where you've got skin in the game. We welcome people, to be involved in Iron Sharpens Iron Mastermind. And we've got the framework laid out. We teach people actually how to start their own groups. We have a product called the Mastermind Playbook, to where we teach people all over the world how to start your own group. A lot of people have an audience, but they don't have the framework. We help with that. A lot of people do that, and then they get involved in our group, and they're learning as they go, and then they're growing personally. And so there's a number of ways to approach this. The important thing is to surround yourself. And we all know Jim Rohn's quote, "You are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with." And I think that's more accurate assessment than we give it credit for, because you want to be around other people with a growth mindset, not a fixed mindset. You want to be around people that encourage you and challenge you, people that are willing to throw the flag on you, right? And say, "Hey, Doug, you can't do that." Like, you say that to your wife one more time, she's liable to pack her bags and get out of there. Like, you've got to have boundaries. You've got to be at home. You got to be around your children. It's people to encourage you to do those things. If I were left to my own devices, I would be probably the worst in the world, because I'm selfish by nature. I've got an ego. I've got pride. We need people around us to help us walk through those challenging times. And community is what we were all designed to be in. We weren't designed to be in isolation, because isolation is the enemy to excellence. And if you really want to excel, you've got to get in community. So you can call that a mastermind, peer advisory, accountability groups, whatever you want to call it. But we need to be around other individuals that can spur us on.
Yeah, I want to talk about paying and return on investment and charging. So from both ends of the spectrum. One, for someone who's just listening to this, and there's mastermind groups that are free that you mentioned, and I know there's masterminds out there that people pay 20 grand a year plus. I'm sure there's way more than that. Talk to someone who might say, like, what would the ROI be on my investments? I get having skin in the game, but really, am I just going to pay to meet with a group of people? What would you tell them?
Well, people with that approach, first of all, it's going to be difficult to see the investment initially, but it's a long-term investment. It's not an expense either. It is an investment in growing your character. Um, it really helps you identify kind of what your core values are, what you're really looking for in life. It helps you understand how you can be a better person. um, I think my ideas are good sometimes until I run it through the counsel of the multitude. And then I find out, man, there's so many pitfalls in that I wasn't even aware of, right? I talked to Jeff Hoffman. Jeff Hoffman was one of the founders of Priceline, and he was talking about 10% of everything that he watches and reads has no bearing whatsoever on things of interest. And I'm like, I don't understand that. He said, well, the irony of that is that the vast majority of my successful ventures have come out of that 10% reading that I had no interest in initially, because it opened up doors and avenues that I didn't even know existed. Well, see, that's what mastermind groups do. You go into these groups and you think you're pretty well versed on a topic until it's brought up, and then you find out how little you really know about it. It also opens up an avenue for accountability, people that hold us accountable in areas that we're weak. It also gives us access to other people that can open doors, because relationships matter most. And when we get into these groups, we find out that relationships trump everything else. Because if I were to make a call for you today to open a door, you leveraged the assets of my relationships. And so our net worth is directly proportionate to our network. And so when you get in these mastermind groups, not only are you being held accountable, you have access, it also gives you resources. There's so many things that are provided, in light of financial resources, documentation, courses, books, you name it, introductions and podcast interviews, you name it, they're there. But then, as I highlighted earlier, perspective is probably the biggest asset, because You think it one way, you see it one way. I had a construction project that I did at my house recently, and we brought engineers out, general contractors, subcontractors. There was a construction problem that we couldn't solve. And we were standing in front of my house. I was trying to do this addition and we could not solve it. 2 weeks later, I was sitting on my patio behind the house. I was on a coaching call and I looked up and I solved it immediately. And the reason I did is we looked at it from a different perspective. You see, that's what mastermind groups do for you. When you present whatever area of life, personally, professionally, spiritually, so many different areas in our life that we can present and we get a different perspective, it could be the game changer. And you're saying, what ROI is there? So this is a very, very small example. But there's two gentlemen that joined our mastermind group, Iron Sharpens Iron, 3.5 years ago. Two brothers, they were in the real estate business and they had bought 4 houses. Well, they wanted to buy more houses, but they didn't have the resources. A connection a year later within the mastermind group, let's fast forward 36 months. Today, they own 250 houses. And their goal this year is to buy 200 additional houses this year because they made a connection. They built trust with an individual that had unlimited resources. And at the end of next year, they'll own over 500 houses. So
Wow.
you tell me what the ROI is on that, right? That's one example out of hundreds of members. They would have never had that connection. They would have never had that relationship. And the list is endless, Doug. I could go on for hours giving you other examples. We had one guy that was, he was a butt, just to be honest with you, to his family. And we gave him advice. You keep going down this path, you're going to end up in a divorce. And we heightened his awareness to his condescending, judgmental attitude towards his family. And we were able to preserve that relationship. Okay, so what is the ROI on that? Okay, so you get a divorce, you've got 2 small children. I mean, the financial devastation related to that, had he not had people in his life to call him out, is immeasurable. And so it's just in every area of our life. Like what is the downside, right, from getting in a group to get a perspective from others, from having an opportunity to have endless resources, from building a network that is second to none? Like what is the downside of that, right?
Right.
And it's a minimal investment for all the benefit. And so the people that come in that want an immediate financial ROI, 30 days, 90 days, I'm like, you're not for our group because you have a short-sighted mentality. We're looking for long-termers, people that get it. They understand the value of everything that I just described. And then their life is exponentially grander in every arena because of the people that they surround themselves with.
Yeah, and talk to the entrepreneur. You have a lot of people listening who I'm sure want to do their own mastermind groups, et cetera. What have you learned about charging and pricing on the other end when you're the one leading the mastermind
Yeah.
group?
Yeah. When I started these groups, to be honest with your audience, I wasn't going to coach or start masterminds or do podcast interviews or anything 11 years ago. Like I retired from our last business and I went into our mastermind group and Dan Miller goes, "What are you going to do now?" And I said, "Nothing. I'm through. I'm going to buy a place down in St. Martin down in the Caribbean and I'm going to rock myself into an oblivion." And he started laughing and he said, "That's the most selfish thing I've ever heard you say."
Wow.
And I'm like, "Dude, I've been working since I was 8 years old. Like I'm tired."
Yeah.
He said, "Well, take a rest." He said, "But you've had so much experience in business and you and Robin have had such a successful marriage. You need to teach other people." Well, I'm Christian by faith. And so I go home and I tell Robin, we need to pray about this. They've really encouraged me to do this. And so Dave invited me to Entree Leadership Mastery. And he said, "You can be my guest." And so I went as his guest. And I thought, dude, that's pretty cool. It's a $10,000 gift. I'll do that. So I went. And Doug, I fell in love with it.
Wow.
And a couple of guys there at Entree Leadership hired me to be their coach. I said, "Dave, this is your event. They're wanting to hire me as the coach." And he said, "Go do it, man. Go do it." And so I coached them. started getting on podcasts, sharing my story a little bit, and our business just blew up. It was crazy, and so I started a mastermind group. So I wasn't even intending on doing this, but God just kept sending us these amazing people, these entrepreneurs from all over the world, and I kept doing, John Lee Dumas. I've been on there 6 times. Pat Flynn, I've been on his
Yeah.
show a couple of times. Jordan Harbinger, all these people just kept coming. I did one on Pat Flynn, Smart Passive Income, filled up 2 mastermind groups in 30 minutes. And I'm like,
Wow.
man, what in the world is going on? And so here we are. And I'm like, man, it's changing people's lives. The transformational experience is unbelievable. Why would I just sit on the front porch of a tiki hut and rock myself into an oblivion when I can help change these entrepreneurs' lives?
Wow.
And that's kind of where it started. And then my daughter is the COO of our company. She said, Dad, we need to create a playbook, put all the systems and processes in place, all the videos. We'll teach everybody to do what we're doing. And so Inc. magazine reached out, did a story on it. Dave Ramsey gave us an endorsement, took his whole team through our process, and they said, this is unbelievable. Ray Edwards
Wow.
went through it, and he said, this is the best course I've ever taken in my career. And then, Shane Sams, Flip Lifestyles, came to our live event, and he filled up 2 mastermind groups in 30 minutes. When he announced it, he had 108 applications to join his mastermind group because he
Wow.
went through our framework. And so we teach people to do this very thing. I want to do it. Back to your question, charging. We charged $200 when we first started. That was a mistake.
Hmm.
And the reason it was a mistake, there wasn't a high enough pain point for people to show up. Today we charge $575 to be in our groups, and people are like, hey, I feel that and I want to show up. I want to get the value because they got skin in the game. We have over 90% attendance every week. We have 85 to 90% attendance to our 2 live events here in Nashville. We're talking about people all over the country are coming together for a 2.5-day intensive, and we do that twice a year. And we have found that we're able to charge a price that we're able to provide a spectacular, amazing event each and every week. And so if you don't have the resources, obviously you can't provide the level of masterminding that we've been able to do, and to provide the resources and get the speakers and do all the things that we do and put on a spectacular event. Let's face it, there's no free lunches. Okay. If you're going to get something spectacular, there's a cost associated with it. And when you really perform and you really use those resources to put on a spectacular event, people are willing to go because they're getting a huge return on investment in so many different arenas.
Yeah, I want to go back to something you said. I want to talk a little bit about entrepreneurship. Just in this line, you said that I forget the way you worded it, you're a visionary, you're a developer. And so my assumption would be that that means you're not great at follow up, follow through, making sure it gets done systems. I could be
Well, I
wrong
have
on
a
that.
team now that does that. I'm a
Correct.
creator developer, right? I'm a visionary. That's how come I've created 14 businesses. I develop good people around me. We have COO, we have an integrator, we have multiple team members. I'm leading them well, but I don't have to physically do everything, right? I'm either going to automate it, eliminate it, or delegate it, right? I'm a visionary. I want to stay in my zone of genius. I don't want to do something because I'm competent. It's not about, how, it's about who. And we get the right people to do the task, and then I operate in my zone of genius. And I don't want to do things that suck the life out of me, right? Because you won't do that long term. I want to do things that give me energy. I want to do things that God gifted me at, that I can do only what I do. And the mindset of a lot of solopreneurs and even entrepreneurs is that they have to do everything. You can't do it. You don't have the bandwidth to do it. If you're going to scale it, if you're going to maximize it in any possible way, we need to really focus on what brings us joy, where we're gifted, where we can move the needle the best, and then develop a team around you. And so that's what we've been willing to do for my entire career. And that's why we've developed some pretty successful companies because of that mindset.
So good. Just out of curiosity, you mentioned integrator and then you said who, not how. Are you connected with Dan Sullivan at all and strategic coach and that whole
Well, sure.
framework?
I mean, everybody is, right. I mean, he's a great leader of facilitator. He's got some great material out. That was a great book. I'm giving a plug for it right now.
Yeah,
It's not
fantastic.
about how, it's who, right?
Yeah.
And so Dan Sullivan with Strategic Coach does a great job. He actually lives here in Nashville as well. So we got a lot of Nashvillians, right here that do an incredible job. But yeah, anyway, Gino Wickman, EOS, we were
Traction. Yeah.
talking about that. I interviewed him just a couple of months ago, brought him into our community and interviewed him. And he's got a phenomenal program out there.
Yeah.
And
Traction's
we had
unbelievable.
Seth Godin.
Rocket fuel.
Recently, I brought Seth Godin in and
Wow.
gave some great leadership tips. Mike McAllowitz, Brian Moran, those guys are phenomenal leaders in their space. And so, yeah.
Well, you mentioned several times throughout the interview you're passionate about family and want to get back there too. So I'm just curious, before we go into the lightning round, you have a lot of leaders listening, a lot of young leaders. I was telling you before we started the podcast, I have three little ones at home. My wife's a full
Oh,
time
cool.
sales executive. I'm in leadership roles, and
Yeah.
what advice do you have for us young leaders raising young families to keep our
Yeah.
families in the midst of also trying to succeed at work and leadership?
Yeah. I'll talk on this just for a minute. When I was young, I was broke when I was a kid. My dad never made over $15,000 a year in his life. He was a general contractor. He built houses and he physically did it with a hammer, right? And dug the footings with a shovel. I mean, my dad was a hard worker. He was a terrible businessman. But I decided early on that I was going to do better financially. And so I really put my head down and said, I'm going to put in whatever grit and determination is necessary. I'm going to do whatever I need to do to delay gratification, to pour the money back into our companies and build them. I started my first company when I was 18. I sold out to a Fortune 500 when I was 27. So I was able to retire when I was 27 years old. And I
It's a good
said,
day.
this gives me a launch pad to do other things. And went back, bought the company I started with when I was 13 years old. And we developed it and grew it. And the focus that became for me was the tangible assets. It became the big house on the hill, the place on the beach, the place in the mountains, the Mercedes, all the things. And what I discovered when I had the automobile accident when I was 40 years old was that my ladder was leaning on the wrong wall. What I figured out is that I came home with a pocket full of money to a house full of strangers. And my wife
Hmm.
said, thank you for providing for us well, but I'm taking our daughters to cheerleading practice and Girl Scouts and brownies and ball games and athletic events. And you're making money. And I appreciate that, but you're not serving your family well. And when I had the automobile wreck, I realized that nobody cared about the level of success that I had but my family. And I hadn't left a legacy that I wanted to leave. The legacy that I had left at that point was poor kid from Nashville, Tennessee, makes enough money to retire at age 27 and nobody cares. And I said, man,
Wow.
that's not the legacy I want. The legacy I want is Doug Smith's life is better as a
Yes.
result of having interacted with me. I want to be the giver. And so I've really focused outward, helping other people accomplish their goals and their dreams. And I found out that the tangible possessions, the things that moth and rust destroy, is not what matters to people. What matters to people is how your life impacts them. Nobody cares about your things. They only care about how your life is affecting and impacting them. And as a result of that, I discovered that relationships matter most. It's our first core value. And so I would say, Doug, build boundaries. If you're going to cheat anybody, cheat the world and cheat the office. Don't cheat your family because you only have one go through with your family. You don't get a do over. I can start more companies, obviously. I can make more money, but I don't get to relive my children's teenage years with them. I don't get to share those visions with my wife if I'm never at home. And when little Bobby wants to pitch baseball and I've got to send one more email, I've just missed a grand opportunity that in a few years he's going to be gone. And I don't want to be that guy that's rich with no relationships and a destroyed family. It's just not worth it because it doesn't scratch the itch like you think it's going to. So the word of caution is to prioritize your priorities. Really put the big rocks in first and spend an inordinate amount of time focusing on the things that really matter and allocate enough time to make the resources that you need. Money is a tool, and we need to treat it as a tool to live the life that we really want to live. And if we don't really get our priorities, a friend of mine wrote a book, Rory Vaden, lives here in Nashville, called Procrastinate on Purpose. And what we really need to do is be very intentional about the things in our life that really matter. And I think we lie to ourselves, Doug. I think we say these things matter, but your actions are speaking loudly in that you're not investing the time. And for me, it doesn't matter what you say, it's what you do. And if you're not implementing on what you do, then it's really not important to you. So pay attention to your family. Your kids are not going to be there long.
You talked about relationships mattering most, and throughout the interview, you've clearly developed quite a network of other leaders that you connect with. I'm just curious, and even before you, I think you said you were on 100 plus podcasts a year. You mentioned several high profile podcasts. What advice do you have for leaders when it comes to networking, expanding their network, et cetera?
Yeah. Yeah, I would say adopt the mindset that we've had over the course of my career and stop trying to make the sale and focus on adding value.
Yes.
And it's even my sole focus on this today. It's not about what we're going to get out of it, is how can I help Doug spread a message on his podcast that would add value to his listeners? And when you adopt that mindset, the natural reciprocity is going to come back in resources and networking and relationships, and it's connecting. We're very, very intentional about being proactive and building relationships. COVID has really hurt us. The pandemic has really hurt us, but there's still a great opportunity online to build these relationships. And so we just make a very concerted effort at extending our network out on an ongoing basis. And that's by adding value to other people. And we even teach how to do that in our mastermind. We're very proactive in teaching people how to develop these relationships. But it's very intentional.
Oh, you've clearly added value to me today, and I'm sure everyone listening to this thinks the same thing. I want to dive in with the rest of our time into the lightning round. These are just a bunch of fun questions that I ask leaders in every interview. And the
Cool.
first one is this: what is the best advice you've ever received, and who gave it to you?
Yeah, I would say fear missing an opportunity more than you fear failure.
Hmm.
I'm always afraid of what I'm missing, not of the repercussions that are going to. I will kill me to lay in bed at night and think, would it have worked?
Wow.
And so for me, I'm just going to go for it and then develop, if I can have two,
Yeah.
develop a can do mindset. My mom had a saying when I was a child. She would say, can't, couldn't do it, and could did it all. And I've adopted that as my life mantra.
Hmm.
Like, I can do it. It may take me a minute to figure it out, but with that mindset coupled with fear missing an opportunity more than you fear failure, you'll be very successful.
If you could put a quote on a billboard for everyone to read, what would it say?
Yeah, if I could put a quote on a billboard, what would it say? Relationships matter most. That's what is highlighted in my mind in everything that we do because people matter. And so I would put that on the billboard.
Best purchase you've made in the last year for $100 or less?
Oh man, $100 or less. It's a silly thing, but it's a JBL Bluetooth speaker
Hmm.
because I can take it out in the yard when I'm piddling around out there. So a JBL Bluetooth speaker.
Do you have a book or two that comes to mind where that has significantly impacted your life, whether
Yeah,
now or
how
in
to
a
win
different season?
friends, how to win friends and influence people. I think they should make that book required reading.
Yeah.
If
And
I
you've
could
been,
give two, you've
yeah.
already talked about it, but it's who, not how. That is an incredible book. We took our whole mastermind through that book, and it's been a game changer for many people.
I know you're on a lot of podcasts. I don't know if you listen to a lot of podcasts, but if you do you have a favorite go-to podcast?
Yeah, I'm pretty careful about making that comment. I've been on 3,000 podcasts, and I'm going to take
Whew.
the Fifth Amendment on that one.
Okay. What do you wish people knew about your journey that they may not know?
I've kind of alluded to it early on, and I'm not one that's in your face, but Robin and I, this June, will be married 42 years. We got married 2 weeks out of high school. And people ask me all the time, man, how have you had such a successful marriage? And just for me, we have kept Christ as our common denominator. And even when we've reached an impasse, when we go to our knees, we can work through it. And so it's been the key to a successful marriage, keeping Christ at the central focus of our marriage.
You get to spend time with a ton of leaders. I'm curious, do you have a go-to question or two that anytime you meet a leader for the first time, you always ask?
I always ask this question, regardless of who it is please tell me your story.
Hmm.
Because most of the time we're thinking about what we're going to say rather than actively listening. And I always want to let other people's story be their story, never matching them or one upping them. And so I love to learn. And the only way you're going to learn is by asking questions, not telling what you know.
What's your biggest leadership pet peeve?
Yeah, leaders that think they have arrived and they know it all. We can learn. It doesn't matter who we're with. There's always a nugget to learn if we're willing to ask enough questions and we're willing to listen attentively.
You retired at 27. I don't know if you have or had a bucket list, but it sounds like you've had the resources and time. If you wanted to have a bucket list and cross a lot of things off, you could. I'm curious, what's something that you've done in your life that you think everyone should experience before they die?
I'm an outdoorsman. I love to fish and hunt and play golf and things like that. If you're an outdoorsman, one of the most enjoyable trips, and it wasn't expensive, was I spent 10 days in the Amazon,
Hmm.
going down the Orinoco and the Toma River. And it's so far removed from the general populace. The peace, the serenity was immeasurable. And so I would say that doing an outdoor excursion or a trip like that is worth its weight in gold. And primarily, we spend the vast majority of our resources on experiences. I live a pretty conservative life, but we spend an inordinate amount of money on experiences because that's the things that I've found our family enjoys the most.
I love that. So, speaking of which, what else is left on your bucket list, or what are you looking forward to in the future?
When you said bucket list, it made me think about this. My wife and I love to cruise. That's our vacation of choice.
Okay.
Matter of fact, I'm leaving a week from Saturday to go on a pretty nice cruise. We love to do that. But I want to do a cruise around New Zealand,
Hmm.
and I would love to go to Fiji
Yeah.
in the South Pacific. So I think that would be really fun.
Best cruise you've been on? What would you recommend?
Yeah, I would have to say Celebrity in Holland, America. We're about to go on the new Apex. It's their newest ship. And so we're pretty excited about that. My wife's got a big birthday coming up this month.
Come on.
And so we're gonna spend some time on Celebrity Apex.
If you could go back and have coffee with your 20-year-old self, what would you tell him?
Yeah, I would say not get so tangled up in the aspirations for tangible possessions that's going to cost you quality time with your family. I was tangled up in that for a couple of decades, and it just didn't do for me what I thought it was going to do. Now, don't get me wrong. I like to make money and I want to make more money. I hate it when people with money go, money's not important. I want to go, you're a liar. It's really important, right?
Right.
They just take all your money away from you and say, how important. That's not what I mean. But I would better focus on money being a tool of the things that it could do for me proactively in living a life that I've pre-planned, something that I want to do. And I would pay less attention to what people think I should do. I would be very proactive in living the life that I was called to live.
And on the other side of your life, and I think you've already spoken to this, but what do you want to be remembered for? What do you want your legacy to be?
Yeah, I want Doug Smith's life to be different as having interacted with me. That will be a legacy for me that will be immeasurable. If your life was better as a result of having interacted with me.
Well, for me personally, you can check that off. So check on that. Anything else you want to leave leaders with today?
I would just say go out and have fun. If you're doing something today that you don't enjoy, uh, really figure out a way to change that. Lost my sister recently, too early, 64 years old. She had planned her entire life getting ready to retire,
Hmm.
and she didn't get a chance to live it. And so I would say enjoy each and every day as though it's your last, because it could be. And so life is too short, Doug, to be doing things that don't give us energy. If it's not giving your energy, try to figure out a way to get out and do something that does.
Well, Aaron, this has been a wonderful conversation. It's so great to meet you, and I definitely look forward to learning from you more in the future. Thanks for investing in me, and thanks for investing in our L3 community. We really appreciate it.
Hey, Doug, if everyone wants to get involved, I would love to have them for free. This is not an upsell, this is
Yeah,
for free. Every Tuesday, I coach just like you've went through this interview on various topics. I do it every Tuesday. It's called Tuesday Noon live, Live, Tuesday Noon live. It's free. Uh, there's no motivation there other than us educating, teaching, giving, and we do it in areas to help you get unstuck, going through transition, having huge accountability in your life. I just enjoy doing what we've done today, and I do it every Tuesday at Tuesday Noon live.
beautiful. And we'll include links to everything that you discussed throughout the whole conversation in the show notes, so everyone can check out you and follow you, and maybe even get involved in a mastermind group. So thanks again.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me today, Doug. I enjoyed it.
Absolutely.